We're going to start in 1 Corinthians 13. I know I talked about this some time back, but I just want to review a few more things that are just amazing. Everything God does is amazing. Because that's just who he is. He's just amazing. It says love, in 1 Corinthians 13, starting in verse 4, it says, love suffers long. That does not sound like a very fun verse, does it? Love suffers long. Man, that doesn't sound like fun. But love is patient. And it's kind. Kind here is useful, benevolent, doing good. Love does good. Love does not envy. No, everybody should know what envy is. We don't want things that aren't ours, and we don't want to be envious. Love does not parade itself. I've seen a lot of people that parade themselves, build themselves up. And it's never a very pretty sight. I remember reading a saying, and it said, the self-made man used inferior building materials. We need to be building the Lord's kingdom and his grace and love inside of us. And it's not puffed up, vain and ego. You parade yourself. That's some of the things the Lord hates according to the book of Proverbs. The arrogance, the proud look, the lying tongue. Those are things the Lord hates. And love is exactly the opposite of those. Love does not behave itself rudely. Wow. Think our society could use a little more love today? There are a whole lot of rude people and rude drivers. Does not seek its own, but it considers others' feelings. It puts others first. Now for me, if there's 2 pieces of cherry pie and one's big and one's little, I'm getting the bigger one if all possible. Because cherry pie, I have a weakness for cherry pie. But I've noticed here recently, the Lord's changing me and saying, give that to somebody else. Me. Okay. Love is not provoked. It thinks no evil. We'll get back to that in a second. But it does not rejoice in sin or anything that's wrong, but rejoices in the truth. There's a whole lot of people that rejoice when bad things happen. Well, he got his karma. They say whatever they want. Love never rejoices in someone else's misfortune or anything that's negative that happens to anybody. But rejoices in the truth. Rejoices in the truth, goodness, and righteousness. And again, love thinks no evil. And it was a few weeks back, the Lord, that phrase, a month or so ago, I guess, that phrase started going through my mind. Love thinks no evil. It'd be doing something, and it'd come again, love thinks no evil. It's like, okay. So I looked it up, found out where it was. Here it is in 1 Corinthians. So I looked up the word evil, and it really means worthless or injurious. But it's the same word that's used, and I shared this last week, in Romans 13, where it says, love does no harm or has no ill will to a neighbor. Doesn't do anything worthless or injurious to a neighbor. But when the Lord started this started going through my mind, and just when it's constantly coming into my mind, I know the Lord's trying to tell me something. And I like to tell this story because I just do. I don't know why. I said, well, Lord, I know this phrase has been going through my mind. What do you want me to do with it? And he said, I want you to live it. My first response was, are you going to change my situation and make it easier to not think anything bad. He said, no, not yet. So I paused for a minute. Wasn't exactly ecstatic over that answer. I said, well, this reminds me of a TV show I used to watch called Mission Impossible. They always found a way to get it done at the end of the show, though. But I don't know if the Lord didn't like my sense of humor because he didn't say anything. And I thought, okay, if this is what you want, I'm not sure I have the maturity, the wisdom, and the understanding to do this. And if this is what you're asking me to do, it's going to require a deeper level of grace that I know nothing about yet. But this is what he wanted me to do. So he's been changing the way I think. So let's he's been changing slowly, letting me think differently, showing me how to, and actually stopping me when I start thinking a certain way. He says, no, I don't want you to think this way. You pray for them. Do something good. If you notice, some of this is internal, the patience, but some of it's external, the kindness. Love does not envy, internal. Does not parade itself, external. So there's all these things that go back and forth between our emotions and our actions. I just thought that was interesting because I never really noticed that about those before. But I want to go over to the end of that book of Corinthians, chapter 16. In verse 13, it says, watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong. What do we need to watch it for? Well, we need to watch and see what's happening in the world. We need to watch and see what Christ wants to do in our lives. And when we know that, we need to stand fast. You know, in the book of Ephesians, when it tells us to put on the armor of God, we're to put on the armor of God so that we can stand against the enemy. Not go fight him and try to find out what he's doing, but to stand against him, not let him push us around. So we need to stand fast and stand fast in the faith. Be brave, be courageous. Don't be afraid to rely upon the Lord. Be strong. Emotionally and spiritually strong. Not letting the tactics of the enemy destroy us. Not letting what he's trying to do and seeing how sneaky he is and trying to come in and do things in our lives. But to be strong in the Lord, saying, I can't do this on my own, Lord, I need you. That's why when Paul wrote to Timothy and said, be strong in the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ. Because grace was also that strength. But the next verse says, let all that you do be done with love. Now, if we could divide all the hours in a 24-hour day up into minutes, how many minutes a day do you think everything you do is done in love? How many minutes are not done in love? Or they're just things that we want to do? Or doesn't it just change your perspective if you think about it like that? Like, let all that you do be done in love. I can see I have much work to do yet. Let everything, all things, let all you do be done in love. One step at a time. Like Julie said, we're on the journey. We're going to add this to this. And that's a good sequence there in 1 Peter. Let's go over to the book of Colossians. Just 3 or 4 books past Corinthians. Colossians chapter 3. Three verses, starting in verse 12. And again, it's all talking about love and what we should do. It says, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another. This sound like the fruit of the Spirit? The only just missing love, joy, peace. It starts off the fruit of the Spirit, but put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another, and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. You notice he's not really given forgiveness as an option. I think we need to continually search our hearts and see if there's anything that we have not forgiven. Verse 14 says, but above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which also you were called in one body, and be thankful. So, there's a whole lot to say right here in these three verses, like put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another, putting up with each other. Oh, sometimes that's a task in itself, is putting up with people. Bearing with one another. Oh, and it says, and forgiving one another. You know where the word forgiveness, what it is in the Greek? How many of you know what grace is in the Greek? Grace is charis, from where we have charismatic. Romans 12, the word that's used there for gifts is charis. They're the grace gifts. Charid zam ahi. Charis is the root word for forgiveness. Isn't that amazing? That we need to have the grace applied in such a way that it changes our hearts, that we're able to forgive. I didn't have time to really get into this word, but when I saw that, I just went, okay, that makes a whole lot of sense, that the word forgiveness would start off as the root word of grace. That you have to, and to me, because I've been saying that without grace, it's almost impossible to love. With grace, it's impossible to forgive. And now I'm finding out that grace is actually the root word for forgive. There's something else that's added. And I'm going to study that more, because I think there's a truth there that the Lord wants to bring out. That His grace is so vital for forgiveness. And it's actually the same root word, or the root word charis is the root word for forgiveness. Like, This is going to be interesting, because I think there's some real truth there that the Lord wants to bring out about grace and forgiveness. And actually, I figured I'd write a volume 2 to the book on grace, and it's going to be the unity of grace, love, and forgiveness. Or something like that. May change the title, I don't know, but the fruit of the Spirit. You know, when we look at all of these things, I'm going to go back a couple books just to Galatians chapter 5, and I think Pam did such a fine job of reading them today, but I thought, that's part of my notes. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And here in Colossians it says, tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another, forgiving. Put on love. Let all that you do be done in love. Put on love. And that word put on in the Greek is like putting on like an outer garment. Let it be what everyone sees when they look at you. It's love. Forgiving one another. Charizomai. Grace in action. We have a choice to let go. That's amazing. Grace is part of forgiveness. In the very word. But I think more importantly than that, grace is a bigger part of forgiveness in your heart. Anytime you just want to question anything, just look at 1 Corinthians 13 and see how love behaves. And see how much we do not love. Or that we allow other things to interfere with His love. I do. Sometimes I want what I want. Sometimes I get busy thinking about other things, doing what life requires us to do. But we're to put on all of these things. All these things are aspects of love. The fruit of the Spirit, tender mercies, kindness, all of those things are aspects of love. That's what He requires of us. It would be nice if He would have said, hey, if you guys feel like loving, you can. But He didn't. He said, if you love me, follow my commands. And this is the greatest command, that you love one another. That you love one another. Not that you are nice to each other, but that you love one another. Not that you build big temples or do anything else, but you love one another. Hopefully, I will keep learning what is required in God's love. Because I know that it also requires grace. Grace is the underlying factor that is necessary to get us out of the way so that His love can flow through us. Forgiving with grace. Grace is part of forgiving. I'm just so excited about studying that word more and finding out what all it means. But for now, think about it. Grace is a part of love. Grace is part of forgiveness. And without grace, neither one of them can really be manifested in our lives the way the Lord wants them to be. And I think it's strange that for the most part, we know that we were told to love, but we've forgotten all the little nuances of grace in the New Testament, which would show us how much it affects how we love and that we can love. We're just told to love, and when people try to do it on their own, we fail. Because we do not have His capacity for love. And I like what Ian said this morning, that His love was there, just overwhelming, just beautiful. That's amazing. Everyone should experience that. But I can't love without God's grace working in me first. Maybe I'm just the exception to the rule, but I've found that I don't even like people sometimes. But I'm supposed to love them? Grace has got to get me out of the way so I can love. Grace has got to get me out of the way so I can forgive. We will continue looking into love, but I'm really excited about love and grace and forgiveness.